Welcome to Innovator Café, the entrepreneur go-to, with your host, attorney Dave Stevens. Through each episode, Dave and his guests provide resources and assurances to build a company growth roadmap. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the website StevensLawGroup.com. Now here's the host of Innovator Café, Dave Stevens.
Hi, and welcome back to Innovator Cafe. Today, we're very fortunate to have one of my favorite innovators, Ron Vaisbort, on board to talk about innovation and the future. Ron, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Dave. Happy to be here. Ron Vaisbort. I am a serial entrepreneur and lawyer in disguise. Since my earliest days growing up in a family business, I always knew that I wanted to have my own business. My family, my father in particular, kind of taught me the value of that. But at the same time, my family being immigrants to the US, were very focused on education and having a profession, having a trade. And so I've led this sort of, schizophrenic life of both being a professional, but my heart and mind and passion always being in being an innovator and an entrepreneur.
We've been living parallel lives, Ron. We've met later in our lives, but we were raised very, very similarly. And it's really amazing how you've been raised can really influence your future, no matter what line of work you find yourself in. And here we are, frustrated entrepreneurs, right? Helping other entrepreneurs on the sidelines, in the rear with the gear, right? So tell us about how you started your career and how you started to morph more into an entrepreneur.
My plan through college was, happily went to college, went to Cal. There was no doubt that I would go to college, but my plan was to really get through it as quickly as possible, 4 years or less. And my hope and idea was that I was going to start a business with my father after I graduated. So no plan to go to law school or grad school or, get a job. That was my plan. And long story short, my dad got sick, midway through college. He recovered and lived a good long life. But, when I was approaching graduation, he was like, hey, not a good time for me to start a business. I've got these health issues. Your brother's a doctor, your other brother's a lawyer. They like it. Why don't you go be a lawyer? I had no interest in being a lawyer, but being a dutiful son, I said, okay, I'll apply. Maybe I won't get in, and then I can just go back to dad and say, hey, let's go start a company. I applied. I did get into law school, and then my parents, of course, said, well, you got in, you got to go. So I did, and I was pretty good at it. I did really well in law school. I had good job offers. And again, my desire was not to be a lawyer, but in the face of some really good law offers and high salaries, I was kind of led down that path. Interestingly, during law school was when I started my first company and invented really my
couldn't wait.
I could not wait. I was really working on Plan B, so I didn't have to go work for the law firm. So I invented I invented one thing myself, and I helped another friend who'd invented something try to commercialize it. So on the side during law school, I started my first companies. And the idea I had was an educational software. And this was back in the floppy disk days. So a while back. So, buddied up with some friends, and, one of whom was a programmer, one was, a business guy. And we threw our summer internship money into launching this company. And for lots of now obvious reasons, it didn't fly. And so I went to go work for that law firm, and that's how kind of it all began. But all the while, really, my hope and plan was not to be a lawyer. And I spent the first part of my career trying to figure out how to not be a lawyer anymore and how to be a so-called business guy and entrepreneur.
So that's funny because, a lot of, well, look, attorneys, you've worked in-house positions, right? So you're like this service provider to the company where you're working. You're on the sidelines in the rear with the gear. What was that like watching these businesses grow when your passion really was to be in the driver's seat?
So I worked for a big law firm right out of law school for about 2.5 years, and then as a smaller firm for a couple of years, which completely validated that I did not want to be a lawyer in a law firm.
Right.
I went in, so about 4 years out of law school, I went in-house at a private software company, technology company, where I was essentially the general counsel. And it was a company at an early enough stage in a culture where I was really part of the business.
Right.
And I did not see myself as the lawyer who dispensed advice from the sidelines. I really couldn't have it any other way than to really understand the product, to understand the commercial proposition, the customer needs, all of the business stuff. And so from the very beginning, Dave, I really always saw myself as a business person who happened to have some legal skills that could help these companies.
It's funny because big companies, I've heard complaints, of the legal departments that they don't get it, right? They're like, listen, man, we're trying to do business here. And legal is kind of like, it's this barrier to getting the job done, right? Because they have their procedures. They don't understand what we're doing. But you started out that way, understanding from the beginning.
And I can't say why, except maybe it's this DNA, this foundation of being an entrepreneur or coming from a family business that led me to be different. I mean, literally, I remember, and this is 25 years ago or more, speaking to the founder, CEO of the company, great human being, and it was a software licensing business. And we kept all the contracts in the file cabinet, and there were a few folders full of contracts.
Sure.
When I joined the company, and I asked the founder, I said, Jeff, what's the vision? What's the goal? Do you want a few folders of perfect contracts, or do you want this file cabinet to be full of adequate contracts, good enough? And he said the latter. Mm-hmm. And that meant taking a very pragmatic, risk-based approach to doing business and partnering with sales, partnering with the technologists, and understanding what it would take to manage the risk the way the company wanted to do things to achieve the goals of the company.
And isn't that one of the fundamental foundations of the legal department? It's managing risk, right? And when there's a disconnect, big barriers, right? It's like they think only fighting, no, less risk, right? And that's what holds these guys back. Am I wrong?
But the flip side of it, and why I love the kind of the title or the subtitle of your show, part of our job is not just to avoid and manage risk. It's to give assurance. It's we frequently we're being asked for permission. We're being asked for a sober second opinion that gets the thing done. We're not being asked to give a no. It's really the how, and a lot of lawyers don't see it, and it's not even a matter of experience. I've seen this kind of personality trait in junior lawyers and in senior lawyers, and conversely, I see some lawyers straight out of law school who just get it, and I'm not sure why, but but they just have a different bedside manner from the very beginning. So,
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, some people they take pride in putting the no in innovation, right? I mean, and it doesn't belong there. It really doesn't. It doesn't belong there. And it seems like, especially the academic, or the people from the top schools, right? They do so well, and when they're in school, they do really well in an environment where they have total control. You have control of what you're studying, and you know what's pretty much going to be on the test. You get the right answers, you get straight A's. You get into a company, you go into your risk-based approach, you don't have control, right? I mean, this is the whole world is out there, and you're trying to help the company to be successful. So instead of having that tiny file drawer and rather having a large cabinet, now you've got a real arsenal for getting out there and closing more deals. Tell us how that evolved.
I think the way it evolved for me first came from building a department, building a team, and having an eye for talent that I felt kind of had this mindset.
Yep.
And I haven't batted 1,000, but I've done really well, and I've been super fortunate to hire great lawyers who kind of all with their different styles, but that really shared this approach or were coachable and learned it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really kind of my greatest joy and maybe accomplishment as a lawyer, is having really been able to help develop attorneys, develop their careers and become general counsels in their own right, some very successful. So that's kind of how I've approached it, Dave, is to really, practice this and as a leader, teach it and mentor younger and even senior lawyers that have been doing it a long time to kind of think this way and to kind of not think like lawyers, I guess, is one way to characterize it.
It's a rare approach. It's a rare approach. And fortunately for the people around, look, what you did is you set them free, right? Here they are in the confines of, this is what I need to do to just minimize risk. And you've shown, it sounds like, it doesn't matter what age or level of experience, you set them free, right? And you give them inspiration, and look what they achieved. And they're a tribute to you. They became general counsels, right? They were successful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And but the other thing is, the culture of your company has to accommodate for this. Some, unfortunately, and maybe it's a big company thing versus small, but not necessarily. Not all companies are open to this, right? The culture is more, people stay in their lanes.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not in the technology team, you can keep your opinion to yourself. Thank you. If you're in finance, do the accounting, etc. So, and I think been fortunate to work in a number of companies that didn't have that mindset, including Intel, by the way. That was, that small first technology company that I worked for. We were acquired by Intel about 2.5, 3 years after I went to work there, and we became the networking software division of Intel. And I became part of Intel's much, much larger legal team. And what I found at the time was, Intel happened to be a place where the legal team was held in generally really high regard. And a lot of Intel's success from, the very early days was through obvious contributions of its legal team. So totally different company from going from a small privately held software company to Intel, but the legal environment and the relationship between lawyers and their clients was really strong and open to that sort of partnership. So again, culture does matter. And if you're a lawyer who cares about and wants to be part of the business, which is why I think a lot of lawyers want to go in-house, right? They want to be part of the business.
Sure.
I think some of them really do genuinely believe that and have the skills to do it. Some unfortunately do not. But if that is your mindset and that is why you want to go in-house, make sure you go into a company that is actually going to embrace that. Because I can't say that it's every company.
Yeah, that really comes from the top too, doesn't it? I mean, right from the CEO, from the top leadership, because they're the ones who utilize, if they call that legal services, right? I think if you call them legal services, you're right away putting a boundary around them, right? Aren't you? You're not really, it's not an integrative kind of approach.
What's interesting, legal in Hollywood, as you know, Dave, is they call themselves business affairs.
Really?
Which is right, which is kind of interesting. It's like, okay. Being a lawyer, for a studio frequently means I'm business affairs. But I think that's right in a way, isn't it?
What is that? How does that entail? Give us some insight. And I love getting insight into Hollywood because it's such a mysterious place.
Yeah. So I don't know how it kind of got that label, but unlike Silicon Valley, Hollywood studios, were much more title driven, hierarchical, lots of VPs, everybody's a VP, everybody's a director, right? Very different than I think, at least Silicon Valley, how it's been historically.
Right.
And I think there was always a question. It's like, okay, where does legal fit in this? And at some point, that was actually, I think, referred to as the business affairs department of the studio. So you essentially had two sides of the house. You had creative, and you had production, and you had business affairs. And
how did
so
business affairs interact with everything else?
Similar to Silicon Valley, it's contracts, contract negotiations. I think the dynamic is pretty similar, but I think it was born from the belief that most Hollywood people are really more on the creative side and less the detail business side of the house.
Right.
So you needed those people who were the business folks, and that was kind of frequently lawyers. I think were in those roles, but maybe not exclusively lawyers either.
Right. Well, it's very contract driven. I mean, once they sign the deals, they're often making a movie, right?
Yep. And the success of Hollywood was all in those contracts, right? And generally very, very favorable to the studios.
Sure. The power of the studios.
And let's not leave out the accountants. So Hollywood accounting, the credit goes to the accountants who help them negotiate and draft those, those royalty deals.
Right. How has that changed recently?
I think there's the level of sophistication is probably significantly higher by all parties, right? The balance of powers, especially with I think the diversification in the media space. Remember, this was so concentrated in literally a handful of companies, and in some cases a handful of people controlled everything that you watched in the movie theater or on the television set. And we live in a different world today, right? It's astonishing how, I wouldn't say democratized, but it's a completely different universe from a content distribution. And same is probably true on the book publishing side, right? It used to be, if you wrote a book and you didn't have an agent and you didn't have a publisher, that nobody but you was going to read that book, right? And that world is completely different today, thankfully.
No doubt. It's much easier. Self-publishing a book is so different, than producing a movie, right? You can do it by yourself.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, so this is Innovator Cafe. Let's talk about the future and innovation, and really, where do you see things going?
Well, I think if you aren't following what's going on in AI and even robotics right now. You should, because I think this is going to be profound in a way similar or maybe even beyond the way we've seen things play out in the 16 years since the iPhone rolled out. Because I think what is happening here in the near term, say the next 1 to 2 years, and then over the slightly longer term, 10 to 15 years, and I've got young kids, so I think a lot about that 10 to 15 year time horizon, and I think you do as well. I think our kids are going to be living in a very different world than we live in today, and I'm not characterizing it good, bad. I'm sure there will be some real bad, but I think there's going to be some real good too, hopefully. But the reality is there is significant change on the horizon through these things. So yeah, and I'm I don't think you can be an entrepreneur or an innovator unless you're an optimist. So
no doubt,
I'm optimistic. I always am. That's my default setting. So I'm very excited and optimistic about where these technologies can take us.
Yeah, our kids are similar ages, and it rings in my head as they're growing up, just like I'm sure it does with you, is how do we help them direct themselves to the success side of the equation? Optimism obviously is the most important thing, right? And not being, I don't want to be a patsy, but to be a leader. I mean, if they really are going to be leaders or to be successful, we always want them to be happy, right? So I mean, imagine putting yourself in their shoes and thinking about their future, but we have a different kind of view.
Yeah, and there's a great book, a few years old. I love the title. It's Happiness is a Serious Problem. And it's we all want our kids to be happy, but at the same time, happiness can't be a goal. So focusing on the traits and strategies for success, and what does that look like today, and success in life and career, and the job titles and descriptions and job paths, totally uncertain at this point. The jobs that were considered top tier jobs just a few years ago are no longer. For example, we talked about accounting, CPA. Accounting has gone from being one of the highest paid, highest ranked professions just a few years ago to having dropped dramatically. And that's a function of globalization, function of technology, et cetera. And so you would, if again, unless your kid loves accounting and debits and credits and revenue recognition and stuff like that, you probably wouldn't encourage them down that path because you think it's a good job.
Yes. Right.
It's a lot harder today to figure out what is a good job, at least generically, for 10 years from now.
No kidding. Look, your parents directing you, doctor or lawyer. Wasn't that everybody? Right?
Yeah.
And now if you're a doctor, you're fighting just to get paid because the insurance companies have power over you. I mean, take a look at your bills and how they chop down. I feel bad for my doctor friends. These insurance companies have so much power. It's really hard to make money as a doctor. And as a lawyer, with all the innovations and similar changes, right? It's the same kind of thing.
And even the skills, the skills and attributes it's going to take to be a good and or successful lawyer are, I think, changing dramatically. Things that you run a patent law firm, patent prosecution firm. The days of AI generating a pretty good first draft of a patent I don't know. I don't know if we're there yet, but we're pretty close, I think.
I think we're pretty close. I think we're pretty close. It's just a matter of time, right? It is just a matter of time.
So for those patent attorneys or aspiring patent attorneys that are graduating, today and next year and 2 years from now, I think the advice isn't, well, go learn how to lay bricks. I think it's how are you going to be an excellent patent attorney in this, the current state of technology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think part of that is, I could speak from the patent field anyway. It seems like the first at least 5, even 10 years of training will be similar but supercharged, because you have to be able to tell, what does that first draft look like? What does that work product look like of any quality, right? You need experience to know, to have a nose for that, right? But beyond that, and even from day one, you're right, these tools are going to step in and really supercharge your life. My father remembers when the first calculators showed up. They were the size of a Samsonite suitcase, right? They went from a room that's bigger than my office to something you could actually carry back to your desk and do the basic 4 functions, right? Then HP changed the world with their, I mean, everything was,
Yeah.
but it didn't put engineers out of business. It didn't replace them, right? It just gave them a tool to make them work smarter and faster, right? You still need those tools, but you still need that human side of things. We'll talk about that. I mean, we're talking about professions that are not just, calculations and results. You talk about going to a company and being integrated with the company. You can't yet train a robot to really do that, right? You're helping this human process, because businesses, they win and they lose, they rise and they fail, and it's not, talk about that, how the real integration isn't about just replacing human beings, but talk about how you can integrate and be that better lawyer or engineer, head of technology, head of finance for a company to help them be successful.
I think it's going to take a shift in mindset
Mm-hmm.
from almost the most junior person in an organization on up, because I think technology, AI, and I work for a software company. We focus on digital transformation for procurement, so supplier management, procurement. The software does. We don't have a purchasing department in our company.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need it, because we've got a software platform that any person can use to find a supplier,
Sure.
evaluate a supplier, order stuff. So the role of a procurement person was at a low level was taken away by the software. So in a way, every person has to be a procurement person. So you have to learn the skills, the strategies, the decision-making skills that are kind of higher order human, qualities and strengths, I think, above any AI, that are going to really be valuable to a company. So, like you were saying with the junior, the novice patent attorney, it's not going to be necessarily, they're not going to spend 5 years learning how to draft a claim, but they're going to learn 5 years. I think they're going to spend 5 years learning how to judge a claim and to evaluate it and be strategic as a patent attorney in terms of structuring the overall application itself, and this more strategic, higher order thinking, and being a manager of the technology in the way they would be a manager of a junior attorney today. So
No kidding.
I think we're going to have to train everybody differently. The mindset's going to have to be significantly different, so that unless we want to see ourselves as functionaries doing these very rote mechanical things as our job, and being fearful that our job is being taken away from us,
Right.
we're going to have to really recast our roles to be the manager over the technology itself.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's funny. I've always in all walks of life, you think the real human side comes when people start to ask or answer the question of why. Why are we doing this? Right. And we're not going to readily get that from a robot. The ultimate why comes from the CEO. He's that visionary, right? He's steering the ship. And it's the
Yeah.
human side. That I think that's really the question that is ultimately asked of us as human beings, isn't it?
And I think that's going to be, learning how to use AI. I think every one of our jobs is going to be just in the same way we learned how to do a Google search,
Yep.
right? A few years back, we really need to learn how to ask the why, not just ask for the information or the output.
Yes.
It's
Mhm.
going to be like getting to the why through using these technologies.
It's funny because every client, especially startups, people who've never have no experience in protecting their intellectual property, I ask them first why they want to file patents, right? And it's not this. I don't even mean to be rhetorical about it. I want to really know what's their goal, because they think. I mean, and if you ask them why, you'll often get different answers. You'll get different answers of why. Well, because this is what we do. I need to protect this. What does that mean, right? And they often don't know, right? And so the approach from the human side is, okay, maybe this could come from AI too. Why does anyone file patents? And you get this tick, 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 tick. You get all these reasons, right? There's a place to start. Wow, there's 5 reasons I never even thought of. I only thought of
Right.
one, right? And it opens their mind. Right. And that's just the patent area. Right. And, as an in-house counsel, when people are asking you for things and you start asking why, doesn't that really turn the conversation?
If you're not asking why, you're so likely to miss the real concern, the real problem, and the real objective. And you're right. I don't know that our standard approach to education in this country is enough focused on teaching people to almost lead with that question.
No kidding.
And it's something that is just absolutely critical. And I think we to say double down is probably not enough. I think we really need to rethink, how we think. One of the things that influenced me early on as a lawyer was the work of a guy named Edward de Bono, who coined the phrase lateral thinking. So
Tell me about that.
creative thinking.
Mhm.
So what de Bono said was, he observed that in Western education, we are very, very focused on critical thinking, if anything. And he believed strongly that that was insufficient, and that creative thinking was really the core capability, behind true genius, behind effective decision making, um, and I started to like really focus on this. And this was around the time that my company was acquired by Intel, and I joined the Intel legal team. And and I was, talking to some of my colleagues, and I think even my manager, who was the assistant general counsel of Intel at the time on the legal team, and he said, I want you to come in and give a talk about this creative thinking at a team meeting. And it was pretty basic stuff, so there are some very basic techniques that really get at the why, and expand our minds and how we look at things from different directions, that are incredibly powerful. But it's not taught in any of our children's schools, private or public.
Yep.
It's not taught, this skill. It's not really taught at the company level. People are, education is much more substantive in focus or process focus. We're not teaching people how to think creatively. And yet there is a very specific set of skills and skills that can be practiced that change how you do things, that get to the why, and are, to use the term, much more inclusive than we practice today. But I haven't seen this take off, and I think it's really a fascinating opportunity. And I also think it's where, now, that is going to be our job, to be the creative thinkers, because the AI is going to be a much better critical thinker than we are.
That's a really good point.
It's going to have much better, substantive knowledge than we ever will have. But if we are good, solid, critical thinkers, and like you said, leaders, that's the job that's going to be left for us, I feel.
That's so interesting. And again, our kids are about the same age and they're going to schools, right? And you've certainly heard me bristle about, the education system. We won't go into that, but often you'll see, and maybe it's because teachers are just tired and underpaid. They just want to control these kids. And when they start, opening their mind and going beyond, this, the subject of the day, or the topic of the day, that they can't complete their lesson, right? Because kids start asking, why is this? Why is that? Right.
Which is exactly what we should want, right?
Again?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we should want, but I think it's seen as disruptive. They've got a very, very focused agenda, right? Teaching to the test, teaching to the rubric. They don't have time for that.
No,
Teachers don't.
The teachers don't. That's right. They got to get you to the test, get the results, and get the grades in, right? And there's a lot of pressure to get there. In fact, my own son, it was in his sex education class, and he had questions. I mean, if there's any place you want to ask why in questions, it's about where does life come from and where's my place in it, right? At least I thought that would be the topics, right? And he had to write an essay, and he was asking questions of why, and he wasn't hearing adequate answers, and he was challenging that, and he got written up. The disciplinary.
Yeah,
it just blew my mind. Right? It blew my mind that a teacher would ever do such a thing. They see that as disruptive, right? We told you why. We gave you the lesson. This is why. Go take the test. Right?
Yeah, similar. My son, when he was in middle school, or elementary school, in private school in Silicon Valley,
right?
Will remain nameless. They were doing a project which was very cool about California gold rush. We all learned that in
yes,
elementary school, right? Great stuff. And the project, the assignment was to tell the story from the perspective of a pioneer coming to California for the gold rush from the East Coast of the U.S.
Sure.
And they told them, you can be, I don't know, you could be a gold miner, you could be a shopkeeper. And my son said, I want to be a dog. I want to be I want to tell this journey from the perspective of a dog making the trip. And the teacher
said anyone, right? They said anyone.
What's that?
They said you could be anyone.
Well, apparently anyone but a dog. So the teacher shut it down. She said, no, a dog wouldn't survive that journey. You can't be a dog. And he came home, he was upset, he
Sure.
told us that he wanted to be he said he wanted to be, and again, it was, it really stifled the creativity. And again, it's like, I think whether it's our teachers and us as parents, and in our companies, right, as entrepreneurs, I think that we want to encourage an environment where, there's no monopoly on good ideas. And whether it's, Sally in accounting or Henry in legal, if somebody comes up with a damn good idea on how to do something or how not to do something, we should be listening and we should be encouraging that.
And that's what Innovation Cafe is all about. That's why I started this thing, right? Creativity, innovation, not every department has to be academia, right? But what does it hurt to ask why?
Yeah, and I think starting with that question and being, look, we need to be, I think, diplomatic. We need to be respectful of other people's roles and knowledge. But
No,
but
yeah, it's not just to challenge their credibility or anything like that,
but
right?
at the same, and there's one of the things at Intel and other companies is like criticize privately, praise publicly. I think feedback, asking the why, can be interpreted as criticism. Sometimes it
Sure.
doesn't need to be, but I think some people have to learn kind of the way to do it. And that's something that I've tried to do over my career is knowing that I'm kind of chiming in from the peanut gallery. I'm the lawyer. I've tried to find ways to do it in a non-threatening, kind of open, curious way. And I think if you
Sure.
can curiosity, that is a great, icebreaker, and it opens people's minds to ideas. Just being curious.
Yeah, yeah, and what I'm hearing is that you're adding a dash of humility when you're asking the question. You're not challenging or trying to, to sideline them, right? You're asking why.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, it's genuine, right? It's like you really, don't ask why. And I see lawyers do this all the time. They ask why when they actually really they know exactly why.
That's right.
That's, to me, that's really annoying. Don't do that.
Well, that's
But
trained in lawyers, right? And if you're in court, you're not going to ask a question you don't know the answer to, right? You're presenting to the jury, and sometimes they can't turn that off, right? It's kind of like a cop when he comes home, right? Who's being critical and it maybe even intimidating, right? Where he can't turn off that personality, right? But you're right. You have to check yourself, and maybe it's about building that in to the social structure of the company, because there's politics, right? So you separate that. You say, okay, I'm the leader here, and we're going to ask why. We have some young people present, and we made some assumptions. I want to explain a few things to them. Here's why we're doing this. Suddenly, why is not a four-letter word, right? I mean, right? It's treated like a four-letter word. It's like, okay, that was very helpful, right?
one thing I'll add, and I think we're kind of running down to time, but
Yeah, yeah,
I think part of it, in an easy way for lawyers and others to really start to engage differently, is simply by being present and listening. So one of the things I ask my team to do is, if there's, say it's a lawyer and they're asked to help support the R&D team,
right.
what I say to them is, hey, find out when the R&D staff team meeting is and get yourself invited.
Hmm.
Just be a fly on the wall. Just listen, get to know who the people are, how they navigate, how they discuss things. And by the way, just being present, you'll start to have questions, which maybe you keep in your head for a later day. Maybe you think they're worth asking the why, right? But also, the people on that team are going to start to see you as somebody who's interested in what they're doing and curious and kind of in the know, and they'll start to invite you into the conversation.
Yep. Yep.
So I think, being curious starts with listening and learning and absorbing, what's going on around you, which, again, a lot of lawyers, they're very trained or happy to sit behind their desk and wait for the phone,
Right.
wait for the phone call, wait for the email. And that's one way to do it, but I don't think it's optimized for the world that we live in.
I'll suggest one other thing to bring to your R&D meeting: self-deprecating lawyer jokes. Disarms everybody
Absolutely.
around you, right? Here comes the lawyer. Yeah, he's got good jokes. Invite him, right?
Yes, exactly. And donuts. Food always helps. And you'll get
Absolutely.
invited back if you bring food.
Absolutely. So last bit of advice for the budding entrepreneurs who are looking out into this bright and scary world. What bit of advice can you give them based on your experience?
Number one, work with good people. The people that you hire, in particular to work with, inside your company, every single one of them from top to bottom can be a net positive or a significant net negative. So, it comes down to people and making good choices. So, and same externally, the wonderful thing today with LinkedIn and other things, we have access to almost everybody on the planet.
Yep.
Find the good people, reach out, be open to, relationships, be brave, right? Reach out to people you think will never answer to you.
Right.
And be curious. And I think that's just genuinely kind of the skill set that we all need for the future is be curious, be open, and good things will come.
Well, yeah, and I've found that older guys like you and me, and when you're building your network, they always want to help you. I see a young person asking questions. I think I see myself almost immediately, and I think, oh my God, I wish somebody would have told me this when I was your age, and here it is. It's like a gift, right?
Absolutely. And again, I think we have wonderful tools. The internet itself is just mind-blowing in terms of its capability to help connect you to the world around you, and you should leverage those skills, those tools.
Excellent advice. Ron, thanks for being on Innovator Cafe. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
You've been tuning into Innovator Cafe, the entrepreneur go-to, with your host, attorney Dave Stevens. You can find more episodes on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the website, stevenslawgroup.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.